Okay. Great. Hi everyone. Welcome to the 8th Ballerina call. Thank you everyone for being here. So before we get started with the session, I want to kind of quickly go through some of the ways that you can actually get involved with the Ballerina community, and then after that we can get started. So we have this repo called a community in Ballerina platform that has basically all the information you need when it comes to engaging or contributing to the Ballerina community. So all the information about the community calls are in this folder as well, including recordings, slide decks, and information about what we talked about in that specific call. So jumping into engaging with the community, so there's a few different ways you can engage. If you have any questions regarding Ballerina, or if you want to clarify anything while you're using Ballerina, we have the Slack channel that you can join, and our team is like really very active on that. So you can ask whatever questions you want, and they will respond to you there. We also have the Stack Overflow. So if you do want to ask a question, you can tag Ballerina and ask it there as well. We also have a Twitter channel at Ballerinalang. If you follow us there, we send updates on releases and any content that we push out or any events that we participate in and things like that. So any announcement information basically goes there. So if you want to stay up to date on Ballerina, that's a place that you can follow us on. We also have a Google group, so if you want to get involved in any of the developer discussions, then you can join us there and get involved as well. Another thing that we started is the newsletter. So it's a periodic newsletter where we curate a whole bunch of content. It can be, it's basically content around cloud native development and things like that. So it can be integration, microservices, gRPC. So we pick topics like that and we relate Ballerina to those topics, and we curate the content into a newsletter, and we will send that information directly into your inbox. So if that's something that you are interested in, you can click on this link and you can subscribe to the newsletter as well. So all of these links I will send to you either on the Zoom chat or the YouTube chat as well. So you'll have all the links that you need during the call. So the community call, I will tell you a bit about it when I go back to the slides. So I'll skip that for now. So how can you contribute to the community? So there's a few different ways that you can do this. You can write content for our Ballerina text block, which is the community text block, or you can simply write whatever content that you want as well. You can record and publish video content like blogs and demo content and things like that. And also speak at meetups, external conferences, and even host your own meetups. So you can contact us at contact@ballerina.io, and we will be happy to help however we can. You can also actually contribute to that language directly as well by reporting issues, by creating modules in Ballerina Central, and you can contribute to the source code as well. And of course, please do go to our GitHub repo and start it as well. So if you have kind of contributed in any of these ways, we would like to show our appreciation for that. So do fill out this form and we will get in touch with you as well. So that's basically a bit about how you can engage with the community and contribute to the Ballerina community. Let me just quickly go to the slides and share it. Okay, so like I said, this is the 8th community call. So a bit about the community call. So we try to do this on a monthly basis on the last Tuesday of every month. Sometimes you might miss this based on how like releases and things like that, but this is the timeline that we try to kind of stick to. So the structure is basically our product team, our development team will take a few features, explain it, and then do an actual live demo of those features. And then afterwards, at the end of this, we will open up to a discussion. So if you're on the Zoom call, you can actually unmute yourself and kind of ask those questions, have a discussion with our team, with the other attendees on the call as well. If you're on the YouTube live, you can send in whatever questions you have on the chat, and we'll raise that here in this call. So the recording and slides will be published on the YouTube channel. It's called Ballerinalang. So again, I will send you links to this slide deck and that community page right after I finish talking, so you have all the links with you. Other than that, a few more useful links is the agenda doc. So basically, this has all the information about the past calls and the upcoming calls as well. And we have the notify me form. So if you want to keep track of the community calls and want to be notified of them, you can sign up through this form, and we will actually add you to the calendar invite directly. So you don't have to kind of keep track of when we schedule calls and things like that. So if you are interested in getting that directly to your inbox, then you can fill in this form and we will notify you when the next call is. And also there's a topic suggestion form. So if you want to be involved in the community call, for example, if you want to do a quick 5-minute demo, or if you want to actually suggest a topic that we should be talking about, you can fill in this form and let us know as well. So that's it about the community call. So today we will be, we have some really exciting topics today, which are all really excited to kind of present to you. We'll first start by talking about what's new in the Swan Lake release, which we went into beta, which is really exciting. And we are also going to be introducing a new product that we have been working on that actually uses Ballerina as the underlying technology as well. So the speakers today we have 3 speakers today from our team. We have Samir Jayasoma, Joseph Fonseca, and Milushan Costa. And our first speaker is going to be Samir. Thank you so much, all the speakers, again, for joining us and kind of conducting the sessions for us today as well. Yeah, that's it from me. Over to you, Samir. I'm going to stop sharing.
Thanks, Sam. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. So let me share my screen first. And okay, I hope you can see my screen. So sorry about the bad lighting at my place. I'm in the middle of moving, and my lighting gear is somewhere in boxes. So I'm also wildlife. I do wildlife and landscape photography as a hobby. So I do care about lighting. All right, back to Swan Lake. Let me share my screen. All right. So we recently published Ballerina Swan Lake, but we've been working on this more than a year, I guess, maybe beginning of 2020. So there's an interesting story here. Initially, we wanted to release Ballerina 1.3. If you look at Ballerina 1.2, the latest minor version is 1.2. So we've been working on 1.3 actually. And then we discussed what are the features that we want to introduce to 1.3, things like that. Then we realized we want to do significant additions to the language to improve the overall experience of Ballerina. We'll talk about some of them later. And in doing so, we realized that unfortunately we had to introduce some of the changes, but that are not compatible with 1.2 or 1.2 releases. Right? So some of the features that we'll be showing today are major additions or major changes if you compare those features with Ballerina 1.2. So what I wanted to convey is some features may not be compatible with 1.2. So basically if you have a code that you have already written in 1.2, you may not be able to compile and run them with Swan Lake release. All right. So I think a few weeks ago, we released the first beta version of Swan Lake. Hopefully, we can get beta 2 out today. And our plan is to continue this beta process until we are ready to release a GA version, hopefully before, basically hopefully before this year. Okay. So if you look at the website, we have done some changes to the website as well. And in doing so, we updated the homepage, and also we updated this text that you see here. We had a different one, but fundamentally, it says the same thing, right? And we wanted to convey the niche of Ballerina. Like it says, Ballerina makes it easier to use, basically, as in integrate or interact with network services. You can combine multiple network services, or you can create your own network service. So we wanted to define, we had to like illustrate the niche of the language and why you should use the language. So, but the other thing is we can say what we want, but if we can't back them with enough real world coding examples, there's no point. So this section also, you can see this on our website. Our plan here is to explain why you should consider using Ballerina. Right? So we basically have 6 items here. I strongly suggest everyone to read this carefully, so that then this will give you a good understanding of the language, why Ballerina is unique, stuff like that. So I'll quickly go through some of these. The important thing is Ballerina is data oriented. Basically, Ballerina emphasizes plain data, because when you think about interacting with network services, you work with data, right? So if you are calling a network service, what you get as a response is data. Or like if you're writing a service, you get data as a request, and inside your code, you always end up like manipulating data, transforming, extracting some parts of this data, and also transforming to a new type and sending it back to the client. Right? So Ballerina emphasizes plain data, and it gives you some built-in types to work with the data, like JSON, XML, and also we have introduced some powerful features to work with data, such as language integrated queries. That's sort of a declarative way of processing data. If you're familiar with C#, you know that they also have something called LINQ, like SQL-like syntax to work with data. Ballerina provides a similar experience with our new language integrated queries, but the semantics of LINQ versus the Ballerina's language integrated queries are very different. Even though the syntax may look equivalent, but the semantics are different. So, okay. Another thing is, when it comes to working with data, you think of data, but you don't associate that data with code. So what that means is objects are not optimal to work at that level. Obviously, you need objects to model your internal systems, but when you are working at that interface layer, working with network services, we need to work with pure data, and Ballerina has emphasis on that. I would strongly suggest you to read that part to understand further with more real-world examples. Then the other part is flexibility typed. What do we mean by flexibility typed? So if you look at all the languages, there are 2 extremes. You can see dynamic languages, like most of the scripting languages. Then in the other extreme, you see traditional statically typed languages, most of the application / systems languages. We feel that, so we designed the language in a way that we have taken the middle path. So Ballerina is not a dynamically typed language, but it is a statically typed language, but we delay certain checks to runtime to give you more flexibility and loose coupling. You can see more details there as well. So the other important aspect is the language comes with, so okay, you have data, we have emphasis on data, then we can, the type system provides a way to write or express the format of the data, right? So this format can works as data that you operate in your program, or they can work as a schema. Simple example is when you write your type definitions in Ballerina, you can convert them to your you can convert them to open API specifications. You can get a GraphQL schema out of that, or you can get a, in the case of gRPC, you can get a protobuf definitions out of that. So in types in the language works for describing both operations in the application as well as data on the wire. So read more on that as well. The next one is cloud native. The idea is the language comes with abstractions, first class primitives to model your network application. For example, there are abstractions such as clients, network interactions, and services. So these abstractions are important because sometimes when you have more higher level abstractions, your code becomes simpler and concise and easy to understand. And that, what that means is maintainable. Without, let's say, without those abstractions, you would be writing a lot of boilerplate, and you'll be focusing on boilerplate rather than focusing on your actual business application. So primitives helps you to visualize your application so that you deal with the basically you deal with that model. We'll get to more later. So another advantage of having these primitives is that when you write a Ballerina application, we know that you're writing a service, and we know you're working with a client, and we know that this is an interaction of a client, that this is a network interaction. Because of that, we can do certain optimizations under the hood. One such thing is when you build an application, we can generate descriptors required to deploy your application in a cloud platform such as, let's say, Docker and Kubernetes. So when you say bal build -- cloud equals K8s of Kubernetes, we can generate the required descriptors for you to deploy application automatically without you having to write anything else. You just focus on your code and we will generate the rest. Another advantage of having these primitives in the language is that you can visualize a Ballerina program as a sequence diagram. I mean, if you look at this image, it says in Ballerina, the programs or the code have both a textual syntax and an equivalent graphical form. And this graphical form is based on sequence diagrams. I think we have a session on this today as well. I think Joe will cover that part. Yeah. So that's about high-level aspects of the language. And by the way, let's make this session a bit more two-way rather than fire and forget. So you can interrupt me at any point in the discussion, or any of us. All right. What's new in Ballerina Swan Lake? So I'll cover some of the Swan Lake features in a demo. Obviously, I won't be able to cover everything, but if you, okay, let me unshare. Okay, so if you go to Ballerina website, yeah. So look at the release blog, release announcement. You can get an idea of all the language improvements that are there in the Swan Lake, as well as platform improvements. What do you mean by platform? Here is a language, the Ballerina tool, standard library, Ballerina Central, everything. We generally use the term platform for that. So all the platform improvements that we have done in Swan Lake, and some of the internal implementation improvements. Okay, so we won't be able to cover everything in a single call. I think our plan is to have a series of community calls to cover these features. But today, let me cover a few of them. Okay, so I'll start with the Ballerina package. If you are coming from a Wonder, this may be a little different. Stay with me. So you can create a Ballerina project or a Ballerina package using bal new command. I'll use Swan Lake. Hope everyone can see. Okay. Right. So this creates two files. One is Ballerina toml and the main.bal. Ballerina toml identifies certain directory as a package. Right? It can be empty as well. You don't have to put it if you're just writing an application. But if, let's say, you're writing a library where a library package where you want to push your code into Central, then we expect certain things in the toml. But for that, you have some templates here, like think template equals lib or something. So you can look at the documentation. Okay, so let me open this in VS Code. Sorry. Right. So I have already installed the VS4 plugin. So you can install via in the marketplace. Okay. So let me open the terminal. All right. So this is, you get a pre-written hello world. You can run it via bal run. And but if you want to create executable and run it, you can also use bal build. This will create an executable inside the target directory. And then you could use bal run this file. So both works. Okay. All right. So first, I'll talk about services. I think we had a community call on services some time ago, but I think I'll start with services. So service declarations is how you create a service in Ballerina, right? So in this example, let me create a simple HTTP example. So this may not be the greatest example, but I think I can introduce some language features with this example. Okay, so when you write a service, you start with the service keyword, then you have the service path. It could be slash. This is optional. I think by default it's slash, so you can do slash, or you can have something like this. So this is service path. A service is always attached to a listener. A listener is protocol specific. You can have HTTP listeners, gRPC listeners, GraphQL, things like that. So, and also you can define your listener inline, HTTP. So I have to use, when I press tab, it will import the HTTP module here. Listener, give a port, right? So this is a simple service declaration, but it's just empty, right? There's no code here. Just demo, like you can define your listener outside as well. It works. And then you could have your listener here instead of the inline version. One advantage of having this is if you want to have two services, you can do so. Different paths, that works. Okay, let me revert these changes. Okay. So a service is a collection of resources. or remote methods, resource functions or remote functions. Now, with Swan Lake, we have, you can model your services depending on the protocol. Let's say your protocol is sort of RESTful protocol like HTTP and GraphQL, then most of the time you work with resources and you operate, and then you have resources, and then you have verbs such get, post, put, delete in the case of HTTP. In GraphQL, you have query, right? Right. So you have resource functions, the verb and the resource, let's say person for now, right? This is a RESTful way of doing that. You have a resource name and you have the specific verb. In the case of protocols like gRPC, RPC style protocols, you don't talk about resources. You have functions, right? So in that, the way to model that such protocols is remote functions, like you can say get person. So we do support these two styles, and depending on the protocol, and also other thing is the listener will validate everything here. So this service is attached to the listener, and the listener validates what goes in. So here you get an error. I think, let's see what it says. Remote methods are not allowed in HTTP service. Yeah, HTTP services, they don't allow remote methods. So you can only have resource functions. Okay. All right. So this, I think I explained the difference between resource functions and remote functions, and depends on the particular listener. Can format this. Now here, let's say my curl would be something like localhost : / is a service name. Search path, this is the resource name, and I want the ID as a path param. Or you could do query param. If you want a query param, you could do something like this here. This is resource function parameter becomes query params by default. But if you want path params, they're part of the path. So these paths, the resource paths are hierarchical. Let's say you want to do something like this. So you could do here with Ballerina syntax, this is a string ID / address. So this part is your resource name or resource hierarchy resource path. For this example, I'm not doing this. I'll just do this. Okay. And it should return something. Let's say it's return a person. It complains because I'm not returning anything. Let me define a record type quickly to represent a person. Put some fields here. Okay. Still, now I need to look at the ID, and so there's an ID here. I need to look at the ID, and based on the ID, I should return something. So I could use the database here, right? To query the database, is the ID, and get the person return. But just because of time and for this example, let me use our table type, and this is a good way to introduce our table type as well. So the new table type, you can represent relational data or tabular data. A table is a collection of records. So I'll start with that. So we have table. This is the table type name. So it's a table of person entries. I'll talk about key in a while. ID. So this is a table. Okay. So key in a table, like table, you could look at this as a database table, relational table. You have a row. You have a row for each record, and And key is like a primary key, right? But it has to be unique. So all the records that are in a table has to be unique, as in at least the ID. So we have to mark. You can use one or two. You can have like one or more fields as the ID. So the difference between hash table and the key is in hash table you have key value pairs. They are separate, right? You have key and hash value. In table, the key is part of the record. It is part of the record. So in this, I have used ID. Yeah, the ID is also field of this record as well. Now, it complains here because the ID field is mutable. If ID is a key, the key can't be mutable. Otherwise, there'll be issues. Right? So I have to make it read immutable. So I'll explain the read-only part, the immutable aspects a little later, but for now, let me go ahead with this. So what this means is you can't reassign the value of ID, and also the value of ID is also immutable. I'll talk about that in a while. All good. So I can add a few entries here. Let's say there's a string. Okay. One record entry. Let me add another one. So you get compile time validation here because the key is a duplicate, right? So I have to change the key. All right, I think we are ready with, I hope you get some idea about the table data structure in Swan Lake. So let me do this. Person P, this is person table, get ID. So you have the ID here. I'm using this syntax to get the person. Now, this is a table and the ID is a dynamic value. There may not be a record that contains this ID. So in Ballerina, we represent that using optional types. This is same as person or nil, right? And I think I'm getting an error because it doesn't return any value. So let me do a type test to see whether P is a person. In the language, you can check whether certain value is of type, certain type using our type test expression. And here, inside this block, we narrow the type of P into a person. It's not inside this. It's not a person. It's not person question mark. It's person. We do type narrowing, and then I could simply return. When I return P, I'm returning a person, not person question mark. Else part is where you don't where there's no person here. So in here I should return 404, right? So in our new HTTP module pack module comes up with a way to represent a 404. I think it's not found, right? So I could create a variable and return not found. Okay, no errors now. All right. So here, if you want, you can put a body here. So not found error. I'll use a string template. Let's say person with ID. Use the ID variable. Okay. So I think this works. No errors. It should work. I don't have to run it. Now, the interesting thing here is Okay, it's simple. So, but I'm getting a warning here. It says concurrent calls will not be made to this method or to this function, not an isolated method. It's the error. I think we need to improve the error messages. I think we have a plan to improve error messages in future beta releases. So what this means is this resource function will not be executed parallelly. It will be executed sequentially. The reason is um, here inside the body of this function, I'm using a shared variable, a mutable, a shared, it's a shared variable, a mutable variable, X percent table. Right? So I could have another resource here and modify the person table. Let's say it could be a post. Right? I can keep adding things. So compiler detects that, and compiler says, look, you are using a shared mutable variable. Because of that, I can't invoke your resource parallel. So the listener detects that, and listener basically do a sequential invocation of the resource. You won't get the runtime performance. So this is the concurrency and the concurrency safety features of Swan Lake. Right? So we have added certain language features so that we can detect these things at compile time. Right? So there are two ways to make this correct. Either I could use locks, or I could use I could make the person table immutable. Basically, no one can change it. So if it's immutable, you can it's concurrency safe, right? So I'll try to make this immutable so that I can showcase the read-only feature as well. But the other option is make it lock, but lock is also but some cases you do have to lock as well. We can cover that in a later call. Okay, so this brings to the read-only feature in the language. The idea is, let me use person here again, just to explain the immutable values in the language, types and the values in the language. So this person is mutable. What do I mean by that? So let's say I use myperson.p. I can change age, right, during the program. This is possible because this is mutable. I can make it final, but final doesn't mean anything here because it means you can reassign you can't reassign. Let's say I can't do my person equals something else, right? So that's not allowed because it's final, but I can still change the value. This is not, this is still mutable, right? So I don't have to make it. Okay, so in the language, Swan Lake, we have introduced something called read-only types and type intersection to support, to implement immutable values. So, okay, the language, we have something called union types, right? Here, the type is this whole part. What do we mean by that? My person can have an error, or my person can have a person. That's what we mean by union type. Similarly, we introduced intersection types to the language, something like this. This is the type. What do you mean by that? It means my person, the value, my person should have a person and read only. It has to be both, not O. So we introduce intersection types to support read-only or immutable values. Read-only is also type. I think I'll stop at that point. So if you want to make something read-only, you can use this syntax, and this works the other side as well. There's no issues. Read only and person. Right. So now I can't change. It's a read-only value. Okay. So if I can now, going back to this example, if I can make this person table read-only, then I can get rid of this warning, right? So this is the variable and this is the type here. So I can make read-only and. it's something like this. This is the whole type definition I can use, right? But you don't need that. So now person table is read only. But what do I mean by that? The value cannot be changed. I can't add or remove any entries to this table. But still there's a problem. I'm still getting the warning. The reason is, even though the value is immutable, this variable I can reassign. Probably I should make this as final for now. Okay, now I got rid of the resource function warning. Okay, now I think they're all good. So as you can see, with the new changes, Swanlake, we can compile time detect certain conditions and say, look, you have a problem with your code. Because of that, we can't run your program in parallel. We'll run it sequentially. And look, you have to fix it. You get compile time warnings. So there's more details to this, like we have introduced concept called isolated. Not going to explain that here. That will be a separate community call. But as you can see, you don't need to know most of those internals to write a high performance code. Okay. My last part is configurability. I'll use a simple example. So here port is hard coded. Maybe if you're calling if you use the HTTP client here to make calls and the username, password, or tokens, you shouldn't hard code them. This brings to the configurability of the language. So language, Ballerina the Swan Lake comes with configurability built into the language and also the platform. So you can mark certain variables, certain module level variables as configurable. Right, so I can use the port here. And when you do that, and when you run this program, you can basically pass these configurable variable. Let's say val run. You can pass the values as a command line argument. I think this should work. Let's see. I'll update 8080. Yeah, so the hard-coded value is 1990. Now it's 8080. This is one way. The other way is you can have a config.toml at the root of your package, and then you can say port equals 7070 something. Let me see that. In that case, I don't need this. I can do bal run. So you can not only simple values like this, but you can configure record structures as well. Now the port is 70, so that also works. But in production, you don't. Ideally, this is the source. The package is where you maintain source code, and most probably you don't want to maintain your configs here. Configs may be outside, so you can put your config table anywhere you want. And when you run your Ballerina file, you can pass that config file as an environment variable. Let's say, think bal config files, and this could be path to your config file, config toml. You can provide the path separate. You can provide list of config files as well. And the first one wins. So we at the runtime we merge everything and we get all the values. So if you are like, let's say if you're running your application in Kubernetes, you can use this approach and you can mount volume, and that you can put the config file there, things like that. So there are various options support. Okay, That's mostly what I wanted to cover. I think I covered services, resources, table, mutability, immutability in the language, configurability, and also some aspects of the HTTP module. All right. Any questions? If not, I'll hand over to Joe.
Sorry, just a quick one.
Go ahead,
because
Sam.
you demonstrated the configurability of the variables with the port number. I tried something recently, but what I found out it doesn't really work well with the Docker expose, because I was
Docker.
Yeah, so once I did that, I lost the the entry in the Docker file for exposing the port. I wonder if there is a way another way to make sure that the port is still picked up if it's in this case if it's in the configuration file.
Okay, so if one option is to, okay, there are, maybe we can look at your case. So the ideal way to pass this config files is via the environment variable. So bal config file is environment variable, and value can be a path to a config variable. So in your Docker, we had to look at a specific problem though. Maybe shall we continue that in the Slack channel? Would that be okay?
Yeah, no problem. That's all fine. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. All right. Joe, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, thanks. Let me share my screen. Can you guys see?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Hello, everyone. My name is Joseph, and I'm from the coding team, Ballerina. So today I'll just take you through couple of key changes we did with the Swan Lake release. Okay, so the first major change we did was to Ballerina Central. So as Samira briefly mentioned, with Swan Lake, now we introduce this concept of package, and now the unit of sharing the code will be a package. So in 1.2x versions, the sharing unit was a module. So the central, Ballerina Central was updated so that you can push and pull modules in share code. So let me go to the central side. Yes, so with the introduction of packages, we revamped the central UI as well. So as you can see, what you see here are the packages pushed from the Swan Lake release. So in case you are still using the Ballerina 2.x version, you can switch to the module view using this top selector. So then you can see the modules in Central which are supported on Ballerina 1.2 versions. Okay. So with this central revamp, we introduced some additional features as well. One of the key features that we added was the API documentation support in Central. So let me demonstrate that. So let me search a package here. Let's go to the Kafka package. So here I went into the Kafka package. So in the Kafka package page, you can see the package overview. And on the right-hand side, you can see the API documentation link. When you click that, the central will take you to the API documentation of the Kafka package. So basically, in the new central, any package that you push to the central, we will automatically generate the API documentation for that package and make it available via the central. So even the API documentation, we did like a major design change from 1.2 version. So it has improved in navigation and fill up the API docs. So this same docs you can generate offline with the baldoc command if you want. But then again, like once you push to central, then the documentation will be automatically available for you. Another addition to this new central is now we push even the standard library packages to central. So as you can see, I can search for HTTP. So here, this Ballerina HTTP package comes as a standard library with the distribution. So the same versions are available in the central as well. So with this feature, we can easily push maybe security fixes or improvements to the standard libraries and make them available via central, so that users don't have to wait for a distribution release to get those updates. Yeah, so those are the changes that we did for central. Yeah, and in case you're new, Ballerina, basically central is something similar to NPM or even registry which have packages. Okay, so the next important update is the VS4 plugin. So with Swan Lake, we release entirely a new plugin. Let me go to the page. Yeah, so this plugin is available via VS Code Marketplace, and it's published under WSO2 org. So going forward, the previous VS Code plugin is already marked as deprecated. So going forward, we'll be developing and maintaining this Ballerina plugin released in WSO2 org. And this particular plugin will support both Swan Lake and 1.2x versions of Ballerina. So one of the common questions we had was like, when will add the graphical visualization support for VS Code plugin? So that's available with this new plugin for the Swan Lake releases. And also it has some additional features such as AI data mapping, which helps you to map records. So you can read about that here. So let me do a quick demo on the graphical web. Okay. So what I have here is a simple Ballerina project open. And as you can see, it has a simple integration code. So in order to view the graphical view, you can click this show diagram button. And you would get the graphical view on the right hand side. So as of now, you can only view the diagram for a Ballerina code. We don't support editing yet, but that is something that we are actively working on, and in the future we'll add the support to edit this diagram as well. So if you are new to the Ballerina sequence diagram, so basically the diagram is based on sequence diagrams, and here you can see the connectors that we have in the language as actors in this diagram, and also the line here represent the function logic. So where you have the flow within the function printed as a diagram. Also, this diagram support like update, like when you change the code, diagram will automatically update. So, yeah, with this new desktop plugin. Yeah, another change if you compare to the diagram from 1 to X. So as you can see, we render only one function here. So in case you want to view the diagrams of the other function, you can go to them using this diagram section. Yeah, so those two are the major changes that we introduced with the SoundLake. And so with the SoundLake, like we have improved all the other tooling as well, which we'll cover separately in subsequent calls. Okay, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. Can everyone see my screen? And
Yes, I do.
audible? Okay. So during this part of today's community call, I'm going to talk to you about something that WSO2 introduced recently into public beta. But before going into that, let's do a quick reality check. Now, as developers, we could easily write an application and start running it locally. But if we want to get that application into production, that's going to take some effort. So suppose you write a Ballerina service and you want to expose it so users can start using it. Now, let's say you want to deploy this on a Kubernetes cluster. If you are to do that, you will need to set up a Kubernetes cluster. That means you need to think about security, best practices, and so on. But let's say you thought of all those things and you deployed it on a Kubernetes cluster. But as you know, applications that we write nowadays need to do changes, rapid changes. So you can't deploy to these Kubernetes clusters manually. That means you need to set up your deployment pipelines as well. So that's going to take some effort. Then after all this is done, you expose your Ballerina service as an API to your customers or your users. But then if this is an API, can you expose it publicly? Or do you need some API management on that? Do you need to understand how people are using your API? So those are some questions. And after that, let's say you develop some integration application over here. But and as an integration application, you might not have control over the external systems that it integrates with. So it's possible that your application might break when you deploy it to production. So how are you going to identify these failures? Then you need to dig deep into your application to figure out where the failure occurred. So when you think about all these problems, getting your idea into production can sometimes take weeks or even months. So that's a problem that we developers face every day. But what if there was a simple way to deploy your applications to the cloud just by clicking a button? What if API management was built in? What if you had API analytics and the ability to observe what is happening in your application? Well, Choreo solves all these problems. Choreo is actually an integration platform as a service where you can develop your Ballerina applications on the cloud for the cloud. So the good thing about Choreo is that underneath Choreo is Ballerina. So if you are a Ballerina developer, if you know Ballerina, that means you're already one step ahead. And it would be really easy for you to start working on Choreo. Now, Choreo solves a lot of problems. Choreo's features includes things like low-code development and development using code. So you could switch between those two. That's one of the key features of Choreo. And then as a developer, you will be assisted when you're developing on Choreo. There are some AI features that are there. Then there are a lot of features that will help you as a developer. And then once you develop an application on Choreo, you get observability. You can figure out what is going on in your application. Why is the application failing? Or what is the latency of the request and so on. And when you develop something on Choreo, when you deploy something on Choreo, you get API management. It is already built in. You don't have to set anything up manually. And the other thing is there is support. Instead of deploying this application on your Kubernetes cluster, and if there are problems, you will have to solve them on your own. But when you deploy it on Choreo, you get support. There is a Slack channel, there are other ways to open support tickets and so on. So because of that, you can easily take your idea into production in several hours. So it won't take days or weeks. And that's the power of Choreo. So if you're interested in Choreo and you want to get started, you can visit this link, and it includes all the details about Choreo. So let me do a quick demonstration during this session. So it will help you to understand what Choreo is all about. When you visit this link, you will be able to sign up on Choreo by clicking this button. But since I have already signed up, I'm simply going to log into Choreo. Now, when you log in, you will be presented with the home page of Choreo first. From there, you could navigate into different areas such as your services, your APIs, analytics, and so on. So for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to write a small service using Ballerina on Choreo that talks to the iTunes API. So what I'm going to do is just talk to this service and specify the name of an artist and get the information about that artist from the iTunes API. So to get started, I'm going to create an application on Choreo. I'm going to call it iTunes app. And after that, it's all about development. Now I'm going to develop this API using the get method. And once I click save, on the right side, I have my code editor where I can edit the code like I do in a normal editor. Then on the left-hand side, I have a low code editor. So that is where I can work with the sequence diagram and develop this application. Now, the good thing about Choreo is that you can switch between these two. So let me just show it during this demonstration. So to talk to the iTunes API, we need to make a call to this particular endpoint. And I'm going to specify some parameters. And within these parameters, I'm going to specify the artist's name and so on. So I'll first make a small change on my Ballerina code. I'm going to use some query parameters. So I'll change this to first name and last name of the artist. And that is editing on the code editor. But now let me switch to the low code editor and add a variable. So the purpose of this is to save the path of this endpoint. From here, I'll be using this particular path. And I'm going to use the first name and the last name of the artist. And there are a few more parameters to get the albums that belong to this artist. So I'm just going to copy it from this website. So whatever I do on the low code editor will be reflected on the code editor as well. So next I'm going to add an HTTP connector to make a call to this endpoint. I'm going to use the get method to get this information. And for the resource path, I'm going to use the variable that I defined earlier. Now I erase this entire field, and as you can see, there is a pop-up which showed my variable. Now these suggestions, they are coming from the AI features that are there to help the developer. So it knows that I'm trying to add that path, so it suggests that to me. Next, I don't want to extract the payload. So I'm going to skip that and save my code over here. So once that is done, I can see this HTTP client added to my code. Now, let's say I want to do some changes on the code side. So I can simply click the edit button and switch back to the code editor. And okay, I'll return this back to the user. And even the things that I added using the low code editor, they could be edited from here. Now, when I added this iTunes endpoint, I deliberately made a mistake over here, but I can simply correct it from the code editor. So that's why I mentioned in the beginning that we can simply switch from the code editor to the low code editor or vice versa. Now, if I want to add let's say I want to log the path variable over here. So it's as simple as filling this form and clicking the save button. But underneath Choreo, it's all Ballerina. Now, this is similar to how we develop something on our IDE. After we develop it, we want to test and see if it works. So on Choreo, you can simply click the test button and it will compile our application and it will let us try out this endpoint. So you will get an API endpoint like this that you can invoke, but I'm not going to invoke it from my local machine. I'm going to try it out on Choreo itself. So to do that, what I need to do is simply click this button and say try out and specify the query parameters. Let's specify the name of an artist. And then I just need to press execute. And that returned me with a response from this iTunes API. And just to make sure that everything is working, I'll just open this artist URL to see if it is actually Ed Sheeran's URL on iTunes. Okay, that's the correct page. So once we test it out, we can go live. That means we can deploy our application. Now, until my application gets deployed, let me quickly explain to you what I've been doing during the past few minutes. Now, on the test page, I was just checking out whether my application is actually working. Like when we develop something on an IDE, what we do is we compile and run just to see if it's working. Then only we verify that the application is working as expected. That's what this test section on Choreo console does. But after everything is ready, you can go ahead and deploy this application. So when you click this deploy button, which I did few minutes ago, what actually happening in the background is that my code is getting committed to a Git repository, and thereafter my application is getting containerized. After it is containerized, it will be deployed to a Kubernetes cluster. And all this happen by just clicking a single button. Once that is deployed to a Kubernetes cluster, it would be exposed as an API. And this API that I get at the end is exposed through an API manager as well. So there is API management built in, there is containerization, deployment, all those things are built in. And I only had to click this button over here. And that's why Choreo is powerful. Now, until it gets deployed, let me go over some other features that we have on Choreo. Now, if you sign up on Choreo and if you start using it, you can refer the documentation over here if you need to understand about Choreo. It explains to you all the different things that we have on Choreo, like services, APIs, integrations, and so on. There are some tutorials which will help you, or rather which will guide you to create your first service on Choreo. Then it will explain about the different features that we have on Choreo, like application observability. And let's say you're using Choreo and you get stuck on some issue. You don't have to worry, because you could always get help. You could join the Choreo Slack channel and you could report your problems and we'll help you sort them out. And then in the future, there would be some other plans as well where you can raise support tickets and the Choreo team will respond to you and help you with all your problems. Okay, so the application has been built and exposed, so it's just going to take a few more seconds, I guess. Okay, until then, I'll go through another section. Now, if you're going to get started with Choreo, you don't have to build an application from scratch. If you go to this services section, there are samples that you can try out. So these already have the code. You just have to click this button and start using it. Then there are some integrations as well, where you can integrate your Ballerina service with others like Google Drive, Google Sheets, Salesforce, GitHub, and so on. So all these integrations are pre-built. They are available as samples. And the only thing that you need to do is you just click the single button, and thereafter you can configure this integration the way you want, and then you can start using it. So even if you want to start using Choreo, you don't need to be an expert developer or someone. There are samples already built in to help you with that. So these were the configurations that I told you about. If I just fill this up and if I start this, my integration would start running. So that's how easy it is to get something done on Choreo. Okay, let's go back to our service. Okay, it has been deployed now. So once it is deployed, we get an endpoint like this that we can invoke. I'm not going to build the curl command myself. I'm going to get it from Choreo. So let's set these query parameters like this. We save them. And once that is done, I will get a curl command generated from Choreo. Oops. Sorry about that. So once that is ready, I can actually invoke that. So it's actually working and I'm getting a result from the Choreo endpoint over here. Let me just send a few more requests to show you some features of Choreo. Now I mentioned a few minutes ago that when we develop some application, it's possible that there may be something may go wrong with it. This is especially true when you connect to external endpoints. The thing is, you don't always have control over these external endpoints. So sometimes they can fail, and that in turn might cause your own application to fail. So in times like that, Choreo's built-in observability will help you to figure out where the problem is. Let me filter this using this menu over here. And now I can see the request that I sent to Choreo using the observability features that we have. So Choreo is going to show you the throughput, the latency on your application. And if you drill down into these requests, you can see the latency and the result of each request. So this particular request returned an HTTP 200 code, and it had a latency of 594 milliseconds. Or if I go to another request, I can see the latency of that and the response code. I can also dig deep into the container level as well. If I want to see things like the CPU usage, memory usage, the error rate, all those are available on the observability view. And you can even go as deep as getting a flame graph on this observability view as well. So these things are especially useful when you run into problems in your application. Now, in addition to observability, there are ways to monitor your APIs as well. I mentioned to you in the beginning that there would be API management built in. And that was already configured for us when we deployed our application. But if we want, we can configure it ourselves as well. So we can design this we can add these documents for our API. We can change the subscriptions over here. Then we can publish our API, like we can maintain the life cycle of our API. You will get a developer portal and so on. Then in addition to that, you can even get insights about your API. So there is API analytics built into Choreo. If you go into this API analytics portal and select the particular API that we had. So the API that I had was an iTunes one. I can actually get information about the traffic, whether there were errors on this API, what were the latencies that were observed, things like that. All these are available on this API analytics portal. So that's how easy it is to get something done on Choreo. And with all these features built in, you don't have to worry a lot about getting your Ballerina application into production, because you can do all those things using Choreo's built-in features. Now, during this demo, I showed you so many features of Choreo. So you also can actually start using it. So signing up on Choreo is possible now that it's in public beta. And we would like you to try it out and see how it looks like, how it feels, and let us know what you think about Choreo when you're using it. With that, I'll be ending the demonstration of Choreo. And thank you all for listening to this presentation and joining today's community call. And I'll hand over control back to Sam. Over to you, Sam.
Thanks, Nidushan, and thanks everyone for the sessions today. I think everyone learned a lot from what we discussed today. Do we have any questions? I think there were a couple of questions on YouTube as well. Shall we just take those, bring it up here as well so everyone can kind of get those answers? Some of the questions from Shakir was, what UI tool do you use for the sequence diagram? I think, Joe, you can maybe answer this one.
Yeah, I answered the YouTube channel. So anyway, so the diagram library is a self-built one. So we use React and other JavaScript technology to create the diagram library. So basically what it does is it takes the underlying ASD of the Ballerina code and that the diagram. That's what it is.
Okay, thanks.
Perhaps it's interesting for people to know that it is developed on top of React, right? Am I correct, Joe?
Yeah. Yes. So we use React with the diagram library. So yeah, and TypeScript of this.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? You can either send it to the chat or you can unmute and ask any questions.
I think, Sam, there was another question in this YouTube, and the question was, how do Ballerina run in JVM? I think the answer is yes. So Ballerina has sort of the language specification, and we have two implementations, two compilers, I would say. So one compiler generates JVM bytecode. So yes, that is the most stable one. That's what you see in Swan Lake. So when you do a Bal build, it will generate a jar file, and then you can run it using Java 11. If you have Java 11 up, it should work. We are working on another implementation that's called NBallerina, and that will produce native executables using LLVM. That's progressing. That maybe we are planning to initial release maybe towards maybe Q1 next year. Thank you.
Thanks, Samira. Okay, I think we don't have any more questions so far. You can see some really positive comments on YouTube, which is really nice to see. So thanks everyone for that. And again, thank you to all the speakers and to all the attendees for joining us today. I hope you learned something new and will go and try out Ballerina and Choreo and join our community as well. Yeah, I think that should be it from us. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you.